Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Broadsword Calling Danny Boy, Broadsword Calling Danny Boy, over.
Hello, Robbie here. If you have a Where Eagles Dare fan in your life, we've produced a series of Christmas t-shirts featuring your favourite characters from the movie. Please go to fightingonfilm.com and find the FOSS shop where you'll be able to check out our merchandise.
Hello and Merry Christmas. Today on the show, we tackle one of the greats of the war movie genre as we don our parkas, load our MP40s and get ready to scale that cable car wire as we look back at 1968's Where Eagles Dare, and we have a special guest to help us infiltrate Schloss Adler. We welcome no one other than Geoff Dyer to the show. Welcome, Geoff.
Hi, thank you.
Who better to have with us because he wrote a book in 2018 called Broadsword Calling Danny Boy, and it was just a perfect guest. So Matt, maybe you want to start with the production of this one.
Absolutely. So it's an absolute classic. So directed by Brian G. Hutton, who is also very well known for directing Kelly's Heroes, his other war movie, but he didn't direct too many films. Interestingly, he was an actor turned director. And he also directed an interesting movie called High Road to China with Tom Selleck, set in the 30s. The film's really interesting because apparently Elliot Kastner, the producer, approached Alistair MacLean to write a screenplay. And at the time, a lot of MacLean's books had been adapted from novels into screenplays. So MacLean writing the screenplay before the novel is kind of interesting. In a 1998 film review interview with Kastner, Film Review magazine, I should say, he explained to the author that he told MacLean, "I want a team of 5 or 6 guys on a mission in the Second World War facing enormous obstacles. I want a mystery. I want a sweaty, exciting adventure movie." And that's all I told him.
Wow.
Which is, it's what he got, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
this is the pinnacle of men on a mission World War II action movies. Wouldn't you say, Geoff? I can't think of a better one.
I mean, yes. I mean, certainly MacLean delivered exactly what he wanted. And you can see how it wasn't an entirely random choice on Kastner's part to get MacLean to do this, because, I mean, the description of what he wanted could actually double as a description of, I don't know, Guns of Navarone or Force 10 from Navarone. In fact, any number of MacLean books. But I think with this particular mission or caper or escapade, whatever you want to call it, MacLean really excelled himself in terms of the obstacles encountered. Yeah, this is the kind of apotheosis of a particular version of the World War II small team mission.
I think what helps the screenplay is that Hutton and Kastner, they worked on, I think if I'm right, they worked on whittling down the script from like 160 pages down to like 130 to tighten it up. So perhaps in that editing process that MacLean didn't normally go through, working as a team with other people, that made it really tight and took just the essence and all the best parts.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I mean, MacLean was famously good at sort of stripping down his plots to just sort of action, and he always attributed part of his great success to the way there was really never any romance in his novels, because he felt that was a distraction from the kind of high speed excitement of it. So it's quite interesting that although the script was whittled down. But there is the addition of romance, but it's rather cleverly done because it's romance combined with action. So the relationship between Mary Ure, this kind of very attractive secret agent, even more secret in a way than the others, because most, apart from Burton, nobody knows that she's on the plane, which she parachutes out afterwards. So in some ways, it's quite nice that this, you could say, this rather sort of puritanical attitude that MacLaine had, no sex in my books kind of thing, unlike Desmond Bagley, say. What it ended up doing in this film is that Mary Ure becomes a kind of prototypical feminist hero, in that before then, the role of women was to get endangered, to start screaming and crying, and then ideally get their kit off and then get rescued. And of course, none of that applies to Mary Ure, because she can shoot him up along with the best of the boys, can't she?
She can indeed. So moving on with the production side of things, we've got cinematography from Arthur Ibbotson, who was Oscar nominated in 1969. Rob, you'll like this, that he worked on The League of Gentlemen.
One of my favourites.
With Hawkins, yeah. Tunes of Glory in 1960, The Railway Children. When Eight Bells Toll, that's another classic men on a mission adventure movie.
That's a good one.
It is. And then, of course, in 1971, he did the cinematography for Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory as well.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a varied career. And we can't discuss production without mentioning Ron Goodwin's incredible score, because the first part of your book is dedicated to that opening sequence, isn't it, Geoff? And I love the way you describe that, the way that score just seems to reverberate around the Alps as the chaps are on the aircraft. I think, honestly, for me, if we ever did a vote on it, I think I would say it's the best war movie theme ever done. I don't know what you chaps think.
I hope we're not being disrespectful towards Bridge on the River Kwai with that.
Oh, that's good too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'd say Zulu for me runs quite close. Yeah. Well, like the one of that.
I mean, I like that there's
conjecture early on.
Conjecture is quite, I like it.
But I think the point you're making, Matt, the crucial thing is that it's so difficult to disassociate the score from what we're seeing on screen. And of course, as we know, anyone can come up with sort of a piece of great music. But I think when we listen to a film score, in a way, a sign of the greatness of a film score, in a way, can be how disappointing it is when we hear it without the visual backup. So I think the crucial thing is that perfect marriage, which we get in this, between what we're seeing and what we're hearing.
Yeah, it's a package, isn't it?
It really is.
You can put that music on while you're doing the most mundane of household tasks, and it just makes things a little bit more exciting, I think.
Yes, it does.
I posed that question: is this the greatest war movie theme ever? But we've got to consider that Goodwin also did 633 Squadron in 1964 and the Battle of Britain in 1969. So, and the Force 10 from Navarone as well. In 1978. So he worked on a whole slew of war movies, and two of those have incredible themes. I can't actually remember the one for Force 10 from Navarone.
No, nor can I. But
I can definitely remember 63 Squadron and Battle of Britain's theme.
Yeah.
Themes, so
the thing with the Where Eagles Dare theme is that it's not that you can remember it. It's actually sort of part of one's bloodstream, isn't it? So it doesn't require any cognitive effort to remember it. It's actually just physically part of us.
The snare drum. Yeah, it's great. And I just think I can see a plane flying through the Alps. Like I don't have to, it's just that mental imagery that it sums up. It's brilliant, isn't it?
To round out production, it was filmed in various locations in Austria, with the scenes at Schloss Adler being filmed at Hohenwerfen, Hohenwerfen. Is that
best, Matt?
I'm trying here. Obviously, I've not had enough coffee this morning.
The actors in the film speak better German than you because they speak German in English, of course.
Yes, true. Yeah,
none of them even. I think it's only Nesbitt that makes an effort at a little bit of an accent as well. No one else. They're all supposed to be German speakers, like speaking German, but no one else really makes an effort to put a little.
It's a classic commando book thing where everyone speaks English. I love it.
Budget was 6 to 7 million, I believe, and it was shot on Kodak Easterman, and it was processed with the Metro, because it was an MGM picture, Metro color process, which gives it that characteristic, really crisp, beautiful color palette, and it makes the cold feel cold.
Yeah.
But that basically rounds it out for production. And I know there's a heck of a cast you want to talk about, Rob.
Yeah, there is. And I'll try and rattle through them quite quickly because we could be here forever on cast, really, with the amount of credits these people have got. So, obviously, we have Richard Burton as Major John Smith. He's that late legendary Welsh actor, BAFTA winner, Academy Award nominee. He's no stranger to war films. If you listen to our Wild Geese episode, I'll have run through these already, but here we go again. The Desert Rats, Bitter Victory, The Longest Day, the Spy classic, The Spy Came In From the Cold, which he won a BAFTA for and an Academy Award nomination. And of course, we couldn't finish his credits without mentioning his role in The Wild Geese as Faulkner. Then we have Clint Eastwood playing Lieutenant Maurice Schaefer, another legendary 4-time Oscar-winning actor, known for his roles as the strong, silent type in many westerns, like A Fistful of Dollars, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, High Plains Drifter, A Few Dollars More. He's just as revered for his war movie work, having played the lead in Brian Hutton's follow-up to Eagles Dare in 1970 as Kelly in Kelly's Heroes, as well as No Nonsense Gunny Highway in Heartbreak Ridge, as well as directing 2 war movies, Letters from Iwo Jima and Flags of Our Fathers. And it's a very top-heavy cast, I must admit, because everyone else is sort of like a very good British character actor, or has been in lots of TV work, but they're worth mentioning nevertheless. So you have Patrick Wymark playing Colonel Wat Turner. Spoiler alert, everyone, he's the real villain of the film. He's the late British actor again, who appeared in some classic films of the 60s, including, as we mentioned earlier, perhaps my non-war genre favourite British film ever, The League of Gentlemen. He played Wiley in that. I think he was someone that Richard Attenborough was working for in the start of that movie, if I remember rightly. He played the prison camp commander, Major Giacomo, in The Camp on Blood Island. And he also played Churchill twice, once in a 1964 documentary called Their Finest Hours, then a year later in Operation Crossbow. And apparently he voiced, he was like something of a voice alike for Churchill, appearing in lots of different documentaries as Churchill in voice work. And he also appears in The Battle of Britain as Chief Marshal Mallory, which is quite cool.
I can see him as Churchill.
Yeah, there's a very blurry photo on a fan website, and it looks
good. There's a look of it.
Mm. Yeah, there's a little bit. See, I always think his role should have been Jack Hawkins or Stanley Baker. Would have just cherry on the top would have been really good.
Or Trevor Howard.
Yeah, it's very in that ilk, isn't it? And then we have Michael Hordern playing Vice Admiral Mallory. He was a Shakespearean actor who actually served on HMS Illustrious during the Second World War. His war movie credits include School for Secrets, The Man Who Never Was, I Was Monty's Double, Sink the Bismarck, and he was also in Spy Who Came From the Cold with Burton, playing Ash. We have Donald Houston as Captain Olaf Christiansen. He's a Welsh actor, no stranger to war movies again, appearing in The Red Beret, The Yangtze Incident, The 300 Spartans, The Longest Day again, 633 Squadron, and then towards the end of his career, he was in The Seawolves, which is like a sort of semi-pseudo-sequel to The Wild Geese. Then we have Peter Barkworth, who played Captain Ted Berkeley, a British actor again. He was in Doctor Who, Secret Army. He played Stanley Baldwin in Churchill The Wilderness Years in 1981. His earliest film credit is actually 1953's The Malta Story in an uncredited role. But I think his most known credit is Where Eagles Dare. But he also appears in Patton as well. Then we come on to Ingrid Pitt. She plays Heidi Schmidt. She's Smith's love interest. Known for her roles in cult horror movies such as The House That Dripped with Blood. Then she went on to do Hammer horror movies and she became a real sort of femme fatale in those. And she was also in 1982's Who Dares Wins as Helga, the sort of no-nonsense terrorist henchwoman. And again, I think probably her biggest film credit is Where Eagles Dare. And she would have been reunited with Burton in 1985's Wild Geese 2, but Burton passed away before filming had commenced on that one. Then we have Mary Uri, she plays Mary Ellison, and I bet that Alistair MacLean was up all night thinking of what to call her character. And then we have, she actually appeared alongside Burton in the 1959 film Look Back in Anger as Alison Porter, and she'd also played the same role on Broadway, winning a Tony. So I think it's amazing that you give such, not a small role, but you give such a sort of not leading lady part to a really, really well-revered theatre actress. And she does amazingly well, thinking this is her first sort of action role. I think she's great in it. And then we have Neil McCarthy playing Sergeant Jock McPherson. He was Burton in The Hill, Sidney Lumet fans. He was Private Thomas in Zulu, And he also appears in an episode of The Professionals in 1980, which I thought was quite funny. And then we have Robert Beatty playing Brigadier General George Carnaby. He's a Canadian actor. Some of his first work, he was on the BBC in the Second World War, reporting on the Blitz. Then he appeared in The First of the Few in 1942, Santa Metro London in 1943. One of our aircraft is missing. Matt, he was in Hornblower in 1959 as well.
He was.
And then to just round out the cast, we have our two big German characters. We have Anton Diffring as Colonel Paul Kramer. He's that German actor, that plays an officer in nearly everything you've probably seen him in, such as The Red Beret, Heroes of Telemark, Operation Daybreak, Escape to Victory, the list goes on. And then finally, we have Derren Nesbitt playing Major von Heppen, and he's the big bad Gestapo officer, probably the only true sort of genuine evil character in the film, I think, apart from Christensen and Berkeley.
He's just very sinister, isn't he?
Yeah, he's very sinister about it, yeah. So his early film roles include parts in The Silent Enemy, which was a Lawrence Harvey movie about frogmen, and then he was in A Night to Remember. His TV work, he was DCI Jordan in the BBC's police drama Special Branch in the early 70s, just like a forerunner to the Sweeney. And then again, I think his biggest film role is probably this. And he actually spoke to real ex-Gestapo officers to get into character, which I think was quite a thing. But yeah, that's your cast. I mean, and how good are they? It's one of those perfectly cast movies.
Even the small parts, a lot of those character actors bring a lot to it, I think. Just looks and mannerisms and movements. And even, I think one of them said they had about 5 lines and it took 6 months for him to deliver those 5, but he really enjoyed doing the film.
Yeah, it's quite a contrast, this film, with today's films, where quite often you're straining your ears to hear what they're saying, and people are sort of mumbling away in a very authentic way. Whereas one of the pleasures of this film is the amazing Shakespearean clarity that these people like Patrick Wymark and Michael O'Horden bring to their roles. So even when they're just delivering a really quite matter-of-fact bit of mission speak, you could be forgiven for thinking that you're listening to some great sort of Shakespearean soliloquy from, I don't know, Richard III or Henry V, something like that.
Yeah, everything is really to the point, directed to the audience. I think that's maybe because of Burton's obviously theatre work, and everyone must have been bringing their A game because he's involved.
It's a total movie experience, but we have also that kind of classic British thespian theatrical enunciation going on, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And then we have like the early sort of action type cliches coming in with Clint Eastwood. I think is really interesting. It's sort of almost like a sea change is coming in. I'll talk more about Eastwood later. But we have another retro review for you this week, and it comes from Variety in December 31st, 1968. And I think I'll probably read the whole thing because it's not very long. So Alistair MacLean wrote an original screenplay that was treated with respect for the writer's unusual abilities as a master of action for suspense. The resulting film is a highly entertaining, thrilling, and really lets down for a moment. It's Richard Burton is a British agent. Clint Eastwood, an OSS assassin, head the crew, which leads a femme agent Merieux, who works as a spy. Although the film is replete with killings and explosions, they're so integrated into the story that they never appear overdone. It's more of a saga of cool, calculated courage than a glorification of war. Burton never treats his role, though full of cliches, as anything less than Hamlet. Eastwood seems rather wooden in the early scenes, but snaps out of it when the action starts.
Anything less than Hamlet, I like that.
It's great, isn't it? It's really good.
The scenes in the hall where he delivers that almost monologue, and the whole thing unfolds. It's just, we'll probably come to that later in favourite scenes, I'm sure.
Doubt. Yeah,
it's funny that though they say, it is very Shakespearean, that scene, isn't it? There they are all gathered there, and at the end, of course, a lot of them are killed, which reminds me of that competition in The New Statesman many years ago, where people were asked to come up with tabloid descriptions of Shakespearean plays, and the one for Hamlet was 7 slain in palace brawl, which is turns out to be. But the irony of that, of course, is that the person who looks most like Hamlet who looks incredibly like Laurence Olivier playing Hamlet, is none other than Derren Nesbitt, the bad Nazi.
Yeah, that's great. And always we ask for the one word review, and this week it was an absolute bumper haul. I think the Twitter servers must have been going into meltdown at Twitter HQ, because we had something like, even as we're recording now, we're still having people dropping their one word reviews in. But I will only read a few because we'd be here for hours. So David McNay goes with wintry. Ian McKellen goes with Alps. Brian Williams says Kubelwagen. Adi Bond goes with camouflage. Leslie Moore says jacket. And Brian Williams says silencer. And we had so many people just like quoting the movie. I think Mary Brazier's one of my favorite ones, where she said like 70s haircuts, and I'd never thought of that before. Like, there were some great ones.
Yeah, it's very, very 60s haircuts.
Very, very much so. But yeah, thanks for all your input, everybody.
Eastwood apparently like refused to have his haircut, if I remember rightly.
Oh, really?
I read that somewhere. Yeah.
Wow.
Incidentally, I've got a little extract from Burton's diary from 1968, which I think is great to share at this point. It says, "It appears Where Eagles Dare, a film I made earlier this year, is a thrilling film and is likely to be a huge grosser. The few people who have seen it are enraptured. It's a boy's own paper fantasy with a vengeance. I kill half the German army."
We need someone to edit that. Goes, "Oh, Clint does."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But
to be fair, at the very end, Burton does make the plane wait while he gets those last few lads in that Kubelwagen on the airstrip.
Yeah. He does what he didn't do in The Wild Geese. He forgets to do it late in the 70s.
It's more like a sort of mathematical improbability. I kill half the German army, and Clint Eastwood kills 3/4 of them. There's such a sort of surplus of death. Yeah.
I
wonder if anyone's done a kill count on this yet.
Oh, they have. It's on YouTube. Have you seen it?
I'm sure they have.
It's like a video game type overlay, and it's got like reload never, and it's quite funny. So I think, with talking about kit there very briefly, we should probably move into the alley tally this week.
It's time for Alley Tally on Fighting on Film.
As our guest, Geoff, do you have a piece of kit or a piece of equipment that you love from this movie to kick us off with?
Oh, well, I like it all. I mean, I've got this green. Yeah, I've got this green parka that I wear, that I really like and was so proud of. But I felt rather crestfallen when I wore it to a party and my friend greeted me with the words, "Oh, hello, Liam," as though I was dressed like Liam Gallagher. Whereas but the other day I was wearing it here in California with a kind of baseball hat, and because it was kind of the weather was uncharacteristically bad, I had this moment when I thought, oh God, if the cap was slightly different, then I could actually pass as a member of the Where Eagles Dare crew. So yeah, I like the gear the clothing very much, but it's all great, and it's the key thing to say about it, I think, is that it's it's all German, all the gear that they're using. I mean, they fly in on a German plane. They rely entirely on German weaponry. Of course, as we were saying, they're wearing German uniforms. So it turns out this film, in which we comprehensively trash the Schloss Adler, it ends up really being a tacit advert for the superiority of German technology over British technology, and that's really brought home in the closing scene. I guess it's okay because everyone's seen the film to mention this. So as everyone knows, when they're on the film, spoilers, we finally see a British gun, a Sten gun, and of course, typically, what does it do? Well, it malfunctions. It doesn't work because they've taken the precaution of removing the firing pin. But yes, I love the ironic message of this film, which is that Germany might have lost the war, but it certainly won the manufacturing peace.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's for me, like that Parker as well. I mean, I've got in my notes, I put Parker's pistols and MP40s as like a sort of subtitle, but it is that Parker, isn't it? It's a tan and water camouflage, they call it, and it seems to have been designed for the film off of Parkers of the time, and it's sort of like a mixture of German splinter tarn and sump tarn, and it has a reversible sort of thing where you can wear it one way and it's the white for the snow, wear it another way, it's tree camouflage, and it's so iconic that when you search it up, there's a website in the UK, a company in the UK called Soldier of Fortune, and they make reproduction military clothing, and it's called the Where Eagles Dare Parker. And
how great!
Yeah, I put in my notes, not many war films get a coat named after them, so I think it might be the only film that has.
I think we should also, of course, as you say, it's reversible, which is great. But the other fantastic thing about it, it does seem to have I don't know whether clothing comes like duvets with a sort of TOG rating, but it does seem to keep them incredibly warm, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's a line where I think Burton says, "Put that Parker on, or put that coat on, or you'll freeze to death." And I'm looking at him putting it on. I'm thinking, it's like the thinnest thing going. I'm like, you're definitely not gonna survive if you wear that. But Matt, you're a weapons expert. Do you want to fill us in on some of the weapons used? I mean, we've said the MP40, but I know there's more.
Yeah, well, according to the on location Where Eagles Dare behind the scenes film that was made during the filming of the film, the armorer in that actually talks about how they have 10 to 20,000 rounds of ammunition, blank ammunition for the MP40s ready to go, and they're expecting to use another 10,000 for the other weapons, which I thought was fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah.
In terms of other weapons in there, you've got those really cool suppressed Walther PPK pistols that Clint shoots at an eighth of the German army with, normally from the hip, very very Western style.
Very,
and Merieux has this beautiful little Beretta 950 with a tiny little suppressor of her own on it. And you see that when I think she meets Burton in the woodshed at the very start of the film. And that's probably standing in it for like a Beretta 418 or a model 1934, I think. But that silence is very dinky and very cute. And we can't talk about the alley tally without mentioning our good friend Jim Dowdle on the MG42 in the hall sequence.
Yeah.
So we a few months ago we had Jim Dowdle, legendary stuntman, on to talk about his career in film, and he told us all about that sequence, the iconic sequence in the hall, where he's a young. I think he said he was about 18 years old at that point.
Yeah, he was very young.
And he's the chap that's behind the MG42 firing it, and he has his eyes closed for most of the shots you see him because of probably the concussion and the noise from the blast.
Was he like an armorer's assistant on it or something? I can't remember exactly the role.
I believe that was it. Yeah, he was, and his stunt career kind of grew from there.
Blossomed
he was an extra, and just it's an incredible scene to talk to the man that was on the MG42 in the hall sequence is amazing.
Killed by Clint Eastwood,
of course, he shared that Clint was the man behind the idea of dual wielding the MP40s, which made my day to learn that. That was
amazing
incredible
to learn. Yeah, it's such a great sequence, isn't it? I think it's interesting as well that we this movie is like revered and loved, isn't it? It's eternal, it's timeless. But when you look at the weaponry, you think, oh, it'd be this massive gun fest. But really, there's only maybe 3 or 4 weapons in the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they're not really, they're sort of set dressing until, like an hour or so in. It's amazing how until that sequence, there's very little action, but it's so engaging. I think that's I'll come on to it later, but it's one of the strengths of the movie, isn't it? That it's a war film, but it only has war in it for maybe half an hour. Like it's such a good, interesting movie in that regard.
In terms of the limited number of weapons they have, I mean, there is it's not surprising given that they're entirely reliant on what they bring with them on the parachute jump in. So of course those sort of canisters arrive, but they make their way into the town on foot. So, well, they only have weaponry that they can carry.
Yes.
In the TARDIS-bergens, we can't not mention the TARDIS-bergens.
Bigger on the inside.
Countless sticks of dynamite are coming out of these two bergens. Enough to destroy an entire castle.
Yes, it's funny. I mean, all this kind of outdoor wear and rucksacks, the technology has increased in quality so much in recent years, but still they've not been able to work out how you can get so much into such a small rucksack.
Yeah, I've got one of those coats that you can crush down to about that size, like a fist.
Crisp packet.
Yes, exactly.
A crisp packet. But it's nothing on the TARDIS-bergens that then in the lights.
Yeah. It's how Clint, carries a million rounds of ammunition with ease in one of those things. It's amazing. So I think sorry.
Actually, before we move on, Rob, we can't not talk about the helicopter.
Oh yeah, of course.
The strange inclusion of the helicopter. I suppose it was to give the German general a grand entrance. Would you think?
I think it is. And I always assumed it was because
it's not the same him coming off the cable car, is it?
No, not really. I mean, I always thought it's because they're on this Schloss Adler. It's meant to be this really top secret impregnable castle, and it is a Bell H. How's it? Hang on, put it in my notes. A Bell HTL4. Yeah.
Okay.
I got HTL4. Maybe we're both right. I don't know.
Model, it's probably the same.
I'm no helicopter expert, but I love how it's just referenced to as the machine by the Germans. So they give them a little bit of license there. It's like it's a new contraption. But then later in the movie, Burton just goes helicopter. I'm like, Richard, come on! It's just they just drop it it's like this mystical machine, and it's nothing. I love it. It's great.
I wonder if that's also part of. I mean, that's the sort of anachronism that everyone talks of, and I wonder if it's also deliberate in the same way some of the sort of sequences are, whereby yes, it's a Second World War film, but they also want to just give it just a hint of kind of James Bond, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., that kind of quality,
all the silence pistols stuff,
to make it contemporary. And I should add, by the way, that one of the sort of things about Los Angeles, where I'm speaking from, you see interesting things on the street. So as I was cycling along yesterday, there was this helicopter parked on the street.
Wow.
Just like, I mean, it might not have been exactly that one. It was that kind of size. And there was a sign on it from a guy saying, need to raise money for my brain cancer. So I'm having to sell this to somebody with a good home. So that wasn't anachronistic, but it was every bit as unexpected to see it parked on a suburban street in LA as it was to see it turning up at the good old Schloss Adler.
Yeah, wow. It's I think it's interesting because I talk about the accuracy thing there. I know there's people that say, "Oh, the helicopter, the Junkers is wrong." Oh, there's this and that and the other. But I always think with these movies, it's just in a commando book on filmed, so that the fact that it's inaccurate never even enters into my brain because I know that this never happened. It's not like a Bridge Too Far. It's not like the opening sequence of Saving Private Ryan where they're trying to recreate something. It's just a boy's own adventure.
It's an adventure film. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I just think it's always interesting when people bring up the helicopter. I'm like, well,
hey, if Burton said it in his diary, it's an adventure film. It's not a serious war movie.
Yeah. To Burton, it was.
If you want to pick out, if you want to pick into things, the bus is from the 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
The Graf and Stiff bus is a 50s built bus. There's Marder infantry fighting vehicles which stand in for little tanks in the town.
Well, I think they're actually sour. They're sour SPZs apparently.
Okay, Austrians. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Filmed in Austria. And of course, they didn't use sticks of dynamite. SOE and OSS didn't use sticks of dynamite. They had blocks of explosive, and they never used those little ticking clock sort of delay fuses. They had delay action fuses and friction fuses. And
I also love the larger than life commando book type potato masher grenades that are just huge. Oh, yeah. I love those. They're so great.
But they're there for a reason. It's what the audience expects to see.
And none of these. I think the crucial thing is that none of these anachronisms or things like that, they don't. They never for a moment take us out of the immersion in the experience.
No, exactly.
So it's not like the famous bit in, I think it's in Ben-Hur, when if you look closely, one of the centurions is wearing a wristwatch.
Oh, yes.
And I feel with this film, everything is of a piece, and we're just completely, we give it's that the fabric of belief is never torn by any particular detail that's not consistent with the time.
No, agreed. It is pure escapism. So I think moving on, we should talk about our fave scenes.
Hello there, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to let you know that you can now join our supporting cast over on Patreon. As thanks for your support, you'll be able to help us pick films, submit questions for guests, have first pick on brand new and exclusive merch, and much more. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Again, Geoff, you're our guest. What's your favourite scene?
Well, I guess my favourite scene, I can't remember exactly how long the film lasts, but it's the whole film. The whole film is my favourite scene. But I guess, I mean, you're absolutely right to stress that. For the first hour, nothing much happens. But I think it would be. It seems to me we've got two nicely opposing options. On the one hand, there's the great hall scene with all the talking. And it's the sort of ludicrous but just about plausible plot twists. And then I think the cable car the cable car sequence is so fantastic. And what always strikes me about that cable car sequence in a film where so many people get killed, the body count is incredible, but nothing in the film is as violent as the fight, the good old-fashioned fight on the cable car. Now, it takes place very high up above the valley and all this kind of stuff, but it's sort of good old-fashioned, boot in the mouth, bother and aggro, to use the words of the time. And the two single most violent things in the film seem to be one when Burton puts the ice axe in the guy's arm. That has really got to hurt. And then even more so when he kicks him in the teeth. That really hurts. That really
Donald
hurts
Houston's scream as he falls as well really struck me as a child, and it stays with you. That's a hell of a scream.
I love how you wrote about that sequence in your book. You were saying it's like the most Welsh thing that Burton could have done, kicking in the teeth, and Christensen and Berkeley are a high altitude tag team. I love the words you use there, and something about that scene as well got me thinking last night when I was rewatching it. That scene is very violent for the late 60s, and I think I may have worked out why, or maybe not. There'll be someone out there who knows film theory better than me, but there was a film released in 1967 that starred Warren Beatty called Bonnie and Clyde, and the end sequence of that movie is very violent. They really try to recreate the gunning them down in their car, and that movie was seen as a sea change for the way that Hollywood tackled sex and violence and blood on screen. And this movie is possibly one of the bigger budgeted movies to come out after, and it has those violent beats. You see people burnt, you see people you actually hit in the teeth, fall to their death. It doesn't shy away from these things. It's not done in the way that it's done in sort of something like Went the Day Well, where you don't see the axe going in, so it's not shown. But I think that's interesting that it's made in the wake of this movie that is lauded as being a shift for Hollywood, and it doesn't shy away from it. And as you say, like Matt, that the scream as Christensen falls is great, and the scale and depth of that scene is just incredible for 1968. It's unparalleled even now. I don't think
it's a gorgeous piece of back projection. It took 5 weeks to film. So
I think that for someone of I feel there's a real generational divide with cinema special effects. For somebody of my generation, I was born in 1958. And what that means, I think, is that the old flat projection that you used to get in the kind of early Hitchcock films, I mean, that always looks ludicrous and unconvincing to me. On the other hand, though, I can't bear films with CGI, because the first thing that CGI seems to do is completely remove the law of gravity. With CGI, anything becomes possible. It's like a different universe. Where Eagles Dare, I think it seems to me it takes place between these two extremes of a flat projection that I can no longer buy into, and this kind of computer world.
Yeah.
And although, I can see that it's sort of flat projection. I mean, one of the key things about Where Eagles Dare is that a lot of the stunt work was genuinely dangerous. And I think whatever else you might think about the film, and who's starring in it, gravity is a crucial force in this film, isn't it? And it's never to be underestimated. In other words, to sum up, the danger in that cable car and other sequences seems very real indeed.
Yeah, it does. And when you get the guy falling after the rope's been cut as well, like they don't shy away from that. They linger on him falling. I appreciate everything this movie's doing in its 1968 way to show you all of that and have to get it in there. You can't fake it.
No, exactly. And part of that is the use of blood squibs, which this is a fairly early use of that kind of blood squib to show people getting shot, because a lot of films didn't bother with it. You
Not
saw
really.
the gunfire, the
Someone
actor falls,
would hold where they'd been shot, wouldn't they?
And then you might get a close up with some fake blood, but they were using blood squibs, command detonated, and then they were using like a gun that blew it onto people. So
wow, okay,
So in the behind the scenes short film that was made with the film on location, Wiggles Dare, there's a great little scene that shows the shooting of the bit where they've just blown up the woodshed and Clint has stabbed the sentry in the neck, visceral again. And then Burton shoots with a silenced pistol the other sentry that was on the other side of the bridge, and he comes across. That's such a beautifully framed shot. That lorry goes past, and then the other sentry goes, "Where's my friend gone?" and goes to look for him. And then Burton shoots him. And in the behind the scenes film, it shows that there was a someone kneeling on the floor with an air gun that fires up a little like ball of paint, like a paintball gun sort of thing. That detonated on the extras. I think it's his face that gets hit or his neck. And I just thought that was really fascinating. But I mean, coming off what you were saying about that sea change after Bonnie and Clyde, we also got the Wild Bunch, which is a seminal Peckinpah Western.
Yeah, that's another one.
And that was filmed around the same time as Eagles was. So you definitely get that change in the violence and the visceralness of film after that.
Yeah, except that in the Peckinpah, the Wild Bunch, and I guess even more closely in terms of what it looks like, his later Cross of Iron, that Second World War front film set on the Eastern Front. I mean, what we're not getting in Where Eagles Dare is that slow motion, beautiful sort of poeticizing of extreme bloodshed. It remains very functional, as opposed
very straight, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah.
So I mean, just quickly, my favorite scene is the shootout. It's the other scene I think people will come to when they think of this movie, and I just love how it just rides the line between like parody and pastiche. So you've got Clint's not reloading as not reloading as much as he would need to. But then it's the whole thing of this seamlessly countless line of German troops waiting to be shot, and they all run into the corridor to fall. And then there's every time I watch it, I'm like, he's going to say a one-liner, but he never does. It's the bit where
and that would have ruined it if he had.
No, it would have done, but I always think he's going to. Like when he's on, Clint comes over the stairwell and he sort of smirks at the guys and he opens up on them. Yeah. I always think he's going to say something like a quip. But now they do that. They don't need to. It's this sort of nod to the audience. It's this whole thing of I kept coming back to my notes that he's just playing this strong, silent Western cowboy type character who's just been plonked into a World War II movie. It just seems that because everything he does, he never misses. He has the cool sort of. He says hello to that guy and he pulls the gun out of the briefcase and just shoots him. It's like action movie stuff.
Yeah. And there's a great bit in your book, Geoff, where you describe that whole sequence of his masterclass in movement around the castle.
Where, like Roger Federer.
Where he's shooting Nazi sentries left, right, and center, and dipping into the TARDIS Bergen and popping explosives everywhere. It is great, and it's just a very physical form of acting that Clint nails perfectly.
Yeah, and I think Richard Burton nailed Clint Eastwood's sort of style perfectly when he described his way of moving as a kind of dynamic lethargy.
Yes.
He's
Yeah,
never hurried Clint Eastwood at all.
No.
And just to go back to that sequence where he's shooting them in the corridors, I don't know whether this was just me, but as I watched it and listened to it, I think this was quite deliberately done, that the sort of percussive sound of the German bullets firing actually, I thought, echoed the drum theme of that initial sequence. And so there's this strange irony whereby the more the Germans fire, actually, the more they're enlisting the audio support of a theme which is tacitly on the side of the Eagles, thereby, contributing to the Germans' own defeat. And I've listened to that several times, thinking, first of all, that it was just a sign of how I was becoming so infatuated with this film. But then, I am actually convinced that it is there.
It very much could be. You can definitely see the link there, and you can hear it as well. Like, I definitely get that. And I like how, you just, in your book, you describe the grenades having like Eastwood time when they're thrown at him, because I've always noticed that. I'm like, well, that'd have gone off by now, but no, Clint's got a lovely amount of time just to throw them back and explode them. And he has like one line during that shootout where he just pops his head into Burton and goes, "Grenades," and just sort of like saunters off again. I love it.
The professionalness of that, like, I really like, because they are described at the very beginning of the film in the briefing sequences, professional soldiers, professional killers, and Burton even describes Clint as an assassin. And I like how he just has to say grenades, and Burton knows to go into the little room and take cover for a minute. But I think the thing with that that hallway sequence is the Germans, as you said, Rob, they kind of do just line up to get shot. Yeah. But it's not so egregious that you go, "Oh, come on."
No,
it's
exactly.
not like one of those terrible like early 60s spy films where they do kind of just line up to get shot, the henchmen. There's shots in that sequence where a guy will get killed, he'll roll out of the way as he's killed, and then another guy drops down into exactly where he was.
The choreography
and anyone like using their cognitive like power would know that probably I shouldn't take cover in the exact spot where someone just this second got killed. But they don't. They just jump into the position. But it's so nicely choreographed, and it builds. So it starts off with Clint getting the drop on them as they're coming down the hall. He waits like until they're right on him as well, which is another one of those great moments of tension, which the film does really, really well, and Hutton nails perfectly. But then it ramps with there's two Germans firing MP40s, then there's an MG42 brought up, then there's a single grenade thrown, then there's 3 grenades thrown. It just ramps and it builds, and the whole film is a masterclass, I think, of doing this build, and especially the last act. For me, my favorite scene is basically the escape, and I love how it's composed and constructed, because it never really lets you take a breath, other than that sequence where they rappel down the side of the castle down to the cable car. So you have that the whole sequence which is incredibly enthralling, but then it ends with this miniature shootout where the Nazis get killed, and Mary walks into the room and is about to come face to face with the trained nurse, who is also the receptionist, who is also the general's aide. She's doing a lot of jobs, that lady.
She's the drug dealer as well, isn't she?
Yeah, exactly.
The truth-telling drug.
Yeah,
she's got a lot of roles. The
Clint dual welds machine gun. She dual welds jobs.
Yes, exactly. But you think, oh, is Mary you're going to shoot it? No, like Clint just really coldly lines her up and just drops her.
Yeah.
But from that moment onwards, we get that brilliant sequence of Clint moving around the castle, setting up booby traps and killing German sentries. And from then on, once the whole hallway shootout ends, it continues to ramp until we get to that brilliant cable car scene that you mentioned, Geoff. And even after that's finished, then you get like another little extra climax of them escaping in the bus, which is beautifully shot and beautifully executed. It's just that last act for me is perfect.
Yeah, it's very nearly half the film is taken up with the getaway, the escape, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I wasn't entirely joking when you asked me what my favourite scene was for me to say, well, the whole film, because actually, I mean, one of the things that seems to me such a sign of how skillful Brian Hutton was, it's this thing which I think it's just the rhythm of the film. It's just got this beautiful rhythm to it, which means that if you get in late at night and it's on TV and you start watching it, you're a bit drunk, it's actually very, very difficult to stop watching, because it's not that the action never stops. There are these pauses in the action, but rhythmically you're encouraged to keep watching right up until the end. It just doesn't let up. So it's a masterpiece of pacing as well, I think.
Yes, the flow of it is expertly done. I think that maybe we should just quickly slide into final thoughts, because we're getting into that territory like we always do on the favourite scenes. And just to kick us off, I mean, following on from what you said there, Geoff, this film is perfectly paced. It's one of the films. Sometimes I come on the show and I go, well, you can cut 5 minutes here, you can cut 10 minutes there. But this is one of those movies where I think, no, it's great. It's almost just a 2-act movie. You set up the plot in the first half, second half's all action until the big bad, the villain, the true villain is revealed and he jumps out of the plane, and that's all you need. And it's one of those movies where it just feels fresh whenever I watch it.
Oh yeah,
it doesn't feel dated as much as some of the movies we cover. It's, as I said earlier, timeless quality. But then there's something about it. It might just be me and my shocking memory, but I always seem to think there's new scenes added in. Matt mentioned the bus sequence, and I seem to think every time it's Clint shooting that corridor up, and then they're in the plane. I always forget about that bus chase, but it's always a lovely little extra reminder. I seem to always forget about the scene in the bar, like when they give themselves up. It's something that feels new every time about this movie. And I've also got in my notes, it's just a proper dad film. It just feels like one of these movies that your dad sits you in front of and go, right, this is great, you need to watch this. Because I think I had that. And it feels, it's an ITV4 movie. If you're in the UK, you'll know what that means, because they always seem to play movies like this. But it's just great, isn't it?
It's worth adding as well. It's actually a very long film.
Gosh, 2.5 hours.
But and so often you go to the cinema now and you're thinking, oh God, I could so have improved this film by cutting out 20 minutes or whatever. But this film just flashes by, doesn't it?
It does.
And I think also the other thing about it with films from that kind of time, I always liken it to The Italian Job, another getaway film, is that, I can enjoy watching The Italian Job or any number of these other films. But I always have, my enjoyment always has a slightly ironic twist to it, that I'm always having to make allowances for it. That's never the case with Where Eagles Dare. I can always give myself to it authentically. And the fact that I'm a much more discerning cinema goer now, obviously, than I was when I first saw it, aged 11 or whatever, actually, I feel that what happens is that my appreciation of it has, if anything, increased over time. Whereas that really hasn't actually happened, if I'm honest, when I'm talking about The Italian Job or the Riviera Touch with Morecambe and Wise, which I can also enjoy.
What a classic, though!
Yeah.
I mean, jumping off that, I would say that you can probably start watching at the halfway mark where Clint and Ben are infiltrating into the castle, and you can still feel like you've watched a whole film.
Yes.
In that you get all of the plot points, everything happens, it's super exciting, and it's a great little. It takes you on all the points that it's going to hit anyway.
And isn't that the power of it, though? That it would.
That is the power of it, and it's definitely an amazing, positive of the way that Hutton filmed the film and McLean wrote the screenplay. In that you can start watching at the halfway mark, and you don't really need the film's enriched by the first half. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But you can watch it and you can just remember what happened. Or if you came to it fresh and you'd never seen it before and someone put it on halfway, you would soon pick up what's going on. And you would get all the same enjoyment out of it, which is kind of incredible, really.
No, it really is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of. It's always good if there's a little area of dissent in these discussions. I think that the beginning is so important because we've got that kind of thing of mystery. What's going on here? In that, straight after the parachute drop, one of them has been killed, and it turns out his neck's not been broken due to a failure in the parachute. So it becomes obvious early on that there's some sort of traitor in their midst. And I think that element of suspense, and one of the great things about suspense, it can be sustained in the midst of an entire absence of action. I think that's a really important quality, which key, and that quality of suspense and mystery is only resolved with the big, double cross scene in the Great Hall. So, I feel we'd get a great action film, but we wouldn't get a great suspense film without that.
That's what I was about to say. You get an action film at the end half, but if you watch the entire film, you get that beautiful mix of the suspense and the thriller.
And I'll admit that I need that little sequence of Clint and Richard trying to get into Schloss Adler to work out what happened in that the big hall scene, because I can never work out what's really going on. I always seem to think Richard Burton's the villain. I always seem to think he's the actual villain, and somewhere in my brain I'm always going, no, well, he has a change of heart at the end, doesn't he? He goes, oh no, I can't be a Nazi anymore. I have to help Clint get the guy home. I always think that happens, but he is actually a British agent, and he's just playing the role of a dual agent. But he is a dual agent. But even then, is he? I'm always just conflicted at the end. I'm like, oh, okay, now we're in the end plane bit. This is the actual villain. Everything else was sort of irrelevant. Richard's doing his thing. Mission's fine. And I always need that extra. I spend 20 minutes of that movie thinking, what's happening? What's going on now? Like, oh no, Clint's shooting up the corridor. We're back to where I know what's happening. But I think that, as we said, that's the beauty of this movie, is that it can give you all those things, but you never finish a watch of Where Eagles Dare having felt like you've wasted a couple of hours.
Oh, indeed, absolutely.
Whereas with some of these movies that we do, we're just sitting there in our living rooms going, what the hell was that? But not in this case.
And I think it's because it stands up as a really great piece of cinema. And that's one thing I would sort of say, almost in conclusion, that if you ever get a chance to see it on the big screen, and of course it's in that
I would
great,
love to see it.
It really does look amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that would be the dream, wouldn't it? If we can rent a cinema one day, we'll have to stick it on for everybody.
And just before we round up, I'm gonna mention that there are, in fact, 3 reloads in the film, because everyone says no one reloads. In the whole sequence, you see Clint reload the PPK just as he comes into shot. You can see him rack the slide. And then in the back of the bus, there's at least 2 reloads, and I think Mary Ure reloads as well.
You'll need to do a little reload supercut for everyone to watch.
It's a very short supercut, Rob, but there's definitely some reloads in there.
It dispels some myths. So, I mean, I think that is Where Eagles Dare, and thanks again for Geoff for joining us, because it's been great to talk about the film with someone who loves it just as much as we do. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, and do remember his book, Broadsword Calling Danny Boy, is available in the run-up to Christmas. By the time this goes out, it might be a bit late. But, if Boxing Day, if you're out and about and you're in a bookstore and you see it, do grab it, because it's
use those book vouchers that your nan got you for Christmas.
Yeah,
yes, come on.
Do.
Yeah, not only is it funny, it's a great read, and you'll just love the film even more coming off the back of it, I think.
Yeah, it's a lovely homage to it. It's great. Thank you so much for coming on, Geoff.
Well, thank you both. That was a real pleasure.
And there we have it. That was Where Eagles Dare for Christmas 2022. Thanks again for Geoff for joining us. And we'll see you in the new year when we're back on, I think, the 11th of January, Matt, aren't we?
I think so. So, yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone. Thanks for listening. Hope you have a great Christmas and New Year.
Yeah.
And, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. And watch Where Eagles Dare over Christmas again. Why not?
Obviously. Come on, Rob.
Obviously. We can all give Clint Eastwood a lovely royalty check for Christmas with all the extra money that will help raise him. Fabulous. Have a good Christmas, everybody. We'll see you in the new year.
Bye, guys.
Bye.